I have the honor and the privilege of introducing Sri Pujya Brahma Vihari Swami, who is already well known to most of us. Sri Pujya Brahma Vihari Swami is one of the 1100 sadhus at the Bochasan Akshar Purushottam Swaminarayan Sanstha, shortly known as BAPS, that conducts over 160 humanitarian activities worldwide. BAPS is led by His Holiness Mahant Swami Maharaj, a highly respected, learned and visionary guru. Pujya Brahma Vihari Swami grew up in the UK, was a top scholar and was invited to the Oxford for medicine. He, however, preferred to leave the opportunity and come to India to become a sadhu at the hands of His Highness Pramukh Swami Maharaj. From that young age, he has been a part of the core creative team at the BAPS Swaminarayan Sanstha. He has been part of the team that conceptualized the Akshardhams in Gandhinagar, New Delhi, and the one being built in New York. He was part of the core team of the Mandir in London, which has been awarded 4 mentions in the Guinness Book of World Records. Currently, he is overseeing the historic project of the first traditional Hindu Mandir in the Middle East, being built in Abu Dhabi. He has played a key role in the design and creation of award-winning water shows and Mystique India IMAX experience at both the Akshardhams. Moreover, under the guidance of the senior Sadguru saints, he helps oversee satsang and other social, cultural and spiritual activities of the Sanstha. He has been an active organizer of BAPS in disaster relief activities like the earthquake relief in Bhuj, Kutch, and the tsunami relief in Tamil Nadu. He is an accomplished, thought-provoking international orator who has spoken at national and global meets and conferences. He was invited to address the Global Conference of Human Fraternity, Abu Dhabi, UAE, attended by more than 700 religious leaders from across the world that included His Highness Pope Francis. He has been awarded an honorary PhD by the Gujarat University for his contribution to social, spiritual upliftment of the society. He has traveled across the world and studied global cultures, histories, and philosophies. Put your hands together in reverence for Sri Pujya Brahma Vihari Swami.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Shri Swaminarayan Bhagwanani Jai. Akshar Purushottam Maharajani Jai. Radha Krishna Devani Jai. Siyavar Ramachandra Bhagwanani Jai. Umapati Mahadevani Jai. Guru Hari Pramukh Swami Maharajani Jai. Guru Hari Mahant Swami Maharajani Jai. In the divine presence of Bhagavan Swaminarayan, in the equally divine presence of my Guru Hari, Pramukh Swami Maharaj, Mahant Swami Maharaj, in the revered presence of saints, most esteemed presence of His Excellency Shri Vipul. I admire and respect him not because he is the Consul General of India to Dubai, but my respect grows out because of his humility, availability, accessibility, and also lovability, one of the finest Consul Generals Dubai has been honored with. The beautiful temple and the first scenes that you saw about the BAPS Hindu Mandir in Abu Dhabi. If I have to single out a few people, apart from His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, and all the royal families and our Honorable Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Bhai Modi, if I had to single out two people who have carried the temple in their heart and on their shoulders, it would be His Excellency Navdeep Singh Suri and Shri Vipul. What is happening has been a key and crucial role by all of them. So my heartfelt love, and I wanted you to be here. As the leader of Indians, how proud you must feel that all our people have come this far to take our culture, our ideology and our values to this nation and round the world. So a big hand to all the organizers who have spent this time to come this far. And don't be misled by the locations. They are not just for fun, but it allows them to gather for serious discussions. But at the same time, I also take this opportunity to thank the organizers of this event. In all honesty, I have to confess that I was not aware how much love, dedication, and commitment goes behind a simple idea like fire and safety. I am here because of two people. Shri Pankaj Dharkar, who is a wonderful human being, and also our volunteer Shri Manish Patel, not just because of their invitation, but their insistence. Sometimes we get irritated by insistence, but I'll tell you, in this earth, nobody is really bothering to insist upon anybody unless they love that person. So it is their love that has dragged me, drawn me, and I do believe that I'm happier for that. But what I experienced just 2 days back when the entire committee came to see me, the committee itself was beyond culture, caste, and religion. From all different religions, there's a committee. And when they talked to me, I felt a warmth in their words. There was a commitment in their concern. Of course, they gave me the entire history. Please don't mind me, Your Excellency. They gave me their entire history that we have knocked from doors to explain the importance of fire and safety. But sometimes the officers don't have time. Sometimes the governments have bigger priorities. The builders want to save money, and the residents don't really care. But for 17 years, these people who have organized this have been going from pillar to post to explain the importance of fire and safety. And I congratulate all of you for having a passion. This conference, according to me, is not just a professional conference. There's so much passion. It's not just about trade and manufacturing. And it's not just about professionalism. So don't mind me if there's complete technological disaster. I have no issues. So long as you are here and your heart is here, it's enough for the conference. I believe that passion is more important than profession. When you turn your profession into a passion, is no longer work, it's worship. And your job is trying to create order from chaos. Whenever there's a fire or whenever there's an emergency, whenever there is something that is out of this box, our biggest challenge is to create order out of chaos. That's why you have systems, protocols, procedures, you have drills, you have training, you have sharing of information. That's why we have that. So that's no chaos and you have order. Our late President, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, who had been a great friend of mine and also somebody I deeply respected, he once told me a small anecdote which I think is not out of place here. He said once there was a conference of professionals from all different fields as it is today. And as professionals would have it, in the little moments of discussion, they started discussing that whose profession is the oldest. So obviously in that group, please don't mind me and forgive me, I have no personal prejudice against anybody. The doctors got up. You know, doctors are a rare breed. They are perhaps the only professionals who write before them their title, Doctor so-and-so. You don't have architect so-and-so or engineer so-and-so. You're just misters. So the doctors got up and said, look, our profession always is the oldest because God created man. And from the rib of man, God created Eve. That of course, God needed a doctor to remove the rib. So our profession is the oldest. Before the doctors could sit down, the engineers got up. There will be many, many engineers here said, long before God created man, He created the earth, the mountains, the trees, the lakes. He created the rivers. And for the earth to float freely in space, for the moon to orbit the earth. Of course, God needed engineers. Because what if the mountains started flowing and rivers stood still? That would be a big crunch. So God created the world, and for that He needed engineers to make sure everything is stable, perfect, as it would be. So our profession is older than the doctors. That's when the architects got up, because we have architects here as well. Aha, he said, but who gave God designs? That this is a tree, this is a flower, this is a mountain, this is a river, this is the earth, this is the moon. Because before that, everything was just chaos. To create order from chaos, God needed the designs. And that's when the politicians got up and they said, aha, who created the chaos? So don't feel disheartened. But as I say, God's work is to create order from chaos. Man's unheard duty is to create chaos out of order. When you together are thinking, you are sharing, you are generating ideas to make sure that in an event of any fire, even in event of any emergency, how everything can be handled completely calmly and in orderly fashion, that's why this conference is there. But let's be really honest. I congratulate all of you because you started the entire event with fire safety announcements. But put your hand on your heart. What if there is a fire right now in Grand Hyatt? A real fire, not a mock drill. What would happen? Tell me honestly. You are all wise, you are experienced, you are discussing and debating fire safety regulation. I'll tell you, there would be chaos. To all the organizers, please don't mind me, but we need to think. If there's a fire right now and there's an announcement, there's a serious fire, everybody evacuate. Even after listening to all the announcements, who knows what to do? Come on. We don't pay attention and we think it would never happen. You know why? Because this building is unfamiliar. Despite our knowledge and experience and good intentions, the event of a fire is stranger than fiction. And the biggest problem would be the human response. Of course, it's a great hotel, all the systems are in place, the protocols, the procedures, everything is in place. What can turn an entirely perfect evening upside down is the human response. In this conference, all of you would be discussing all procedures, protocols, and systems and everything. What about the ground level zero human response? And I want to be very frank. At the end of the day, it's the human response. We sometimes forget to ask the basic ideas and questions in any big idea and conferences. You know why? Recently, I was in a big conference which was gastroenterologist conference. All these gastroenterologists were discussing wonder drugs, wonder surgeries, and wonder cures for stomach ailments. But after the afternoon lunch, most of them contracted food poisoning. Because they didn't pay attention to the basic element, food is the reason for gastric upsets and not your drugs, chemistry, and systems. So in any security or critical or safety situation, what sort of a human response can your system generate is going to be the most critical and most important. I'll give you a classic example. We would struggle here because we are half informed, ill-informed, or uninformed. But that's not enough. I remember when Akshardham, Gandhinagar was attacked in 2002, 24th September, just a few days beyond this date. The normal idea, because the whole of Akshardham, we did not have a single armed guard. But then again, I ask myself, what would a single armed guard do against terrorists who are so well equipped? We didn't have any systems in place. But still, we were able to save thousands of people. Do you know why? Without a system, without a protocol, the human response. With a very heavy heart, I want to tell you and open this secret out to you, that when the terrorists did enter, one wise volunteer, because the entire Akshardham is managed by about 500 volunteers, one wise volunteer passed a signal to all the volunteers that close all the doors. Normally, in a security issue, whether there's a fire or any emergency, what we try to do, exit, emergency exit. We try and make sure that people go out. But this was wise man. He saw that the terrorists were outside, so safety was inside. There's no protocol. It's a human response. So everywhere that the doors were closed, not a single death occurred. Despite the bullets, despite the grenades. But in the exhibition hall 1, well, all the doors were closed. Because some of the visitors, most of the visitors had mobile. One lady, out of sheer fear, it's not her fault, she kept phoning her husband, and the husband advised that get out of the building. And she insisted upon the volunteers that open the door, I want to go out, open the door. And after a heavy heart, when the volunteer opened the exit door, the terrorists were just standing outside. 30 people were shot to death. Thousands were saved because the doors remained closed. and 30 died because the doors were forcefully opened. We can't blame anybody. But I am here to ask you, in the same situation, protocols would tell you something else, but to evoke the right human response should be the goal of this conference. I believe you will be able to do justice to saving human lives. And that's not just enough. The human attitude is so feeble and fickle. There's a volunteer here. I do not think I should mention his name, but I asked him yesterday, why are you late? He said, Swami, dekho na bhul jao, ye to hua. I said, what happened? He said, in our apartment, there were, fire alarms going on and on. I said, if there were fire alarms, why didn't you get out? He said, nahi, Swami, ye false alarm hote hain. I said, how do you know there's a false alarm? He said, this is like a mock drill. Every month or so, we have a fire alarm. Perhaps overtraining your people makes them so relaxed that they think it's a mock drill. So you need to find a balance between the system and the human response. That volunteer is sitting here. So I suggest now, after training your people so many times in a mock fire drill, you need an announcement that this is a real fire. Get out. Because people get used to try and refine our system in such a way that it evokes the right response from the people. I remember back in my school days in England, every time there's a fire drill, it was fun. Because we would get to skip classes and enjoy the fresh air. But if it's a real fire, it's not fun at all. All your procedures go out of the window. It's the natural human response that we need to focus on in a conference and after the conference. But the biggest problem that we face, I agree that all the technological people and the scientists will give you the best advice, the best systems, the latest technological developments, like our Consul General said, even against drones and everything. But the perpetrators are a little more advanced. So I want to also tell you, so let's examine what do I mean by a weak human response. A weak human response is not just negligence, it's not just carefreeness, it's not just who cares, I do not care. It's a personal indifference. Our spiritual head, Pramukh Swami Maharaj, often gave this example, and I think it's very, very well placed here. He said once there was a big police officer who was credited to have nabbed and actually jailed so many robbers. His great art was catching them red-handed. After his duties, he had gone home and he's relaxing and sleeping at night. Suddenly in his home, the wife is always so proud of her husband. Suddenly they hear something on their front porch, a sound. Obviously the wife is the first, because they are light sleepers. She woke up and she woke her husband up and she said, hey, can you hear some sound? It's in our garden. In a very sleepy tone, the husband says, yes, I hear it. Suddenly she heard that somebody's opening the front door. She said, hey, wake up, somebody's opening our front door. The husband said, yes, I hear and I'm aware. Suddenly she heard that they were trying to open some doors on the ground, first floor. The husband said, look, I am aware, I know. Light footsteps brought the burglars to the second floor of the bedroom. The husband still mumbled, look, I'm aware and I know. The thieves entered their own bedroom. She said, hey, look, I can see they are there. They're trying to open our lockers. The husband mumbled, I see, I'm aware, and I know. She's probably thinking that my husband is waiting for them to actually rob something and catch them red-handed. Proof. The burglars quietly open, steal, go away, move out of the house, bang the door behind and leave. The wife is so furious. She shakes the husband up and she says, they came, they stole, they ran, and you did nothing? He said, what can I do? I'm off duty. Most of the time we feel we are off duty. We hear about fires, we hear about disasters, we know about our kith and kin, we know everything. But our attitude is that we ourselves are off duty. If this conference can get all of us on duty, I believe you will be able to evoke the response that we really want to. And what do I mean by off duty? Apathy. It's not just about fire and safety, it's about so many things that are happening in this world. So many things that are happening in this world when we think. Who doesn't know about climate change? Who doesn't know that it's real? But because it's not affecting you right now, we screen it out, we block it out, eclipse it, and put it behind our back and pay no attention. But who doesn't know? We have Peter Farrington, somebody I respect, a very spiritual man who has specially come. He's the advisor of environment to the Dubai government. So everybody is aware of this, but it's this general apathy, indifference. Let me ask you a few questions which I have and I do not have answers to. But if at the end of the conference, when you think laterally, not just about fire, at no point in history, please mind my words, at no point in history have there been more conferences for peace, campaign for peace, literature on peace, religious leaders talking about peace, world leader having special meets, global meets for peace, 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 and so many books and articles and theories and research and solutions about peace. At no point in history there have been more awareness of peace than why the largest earning industry of our age is armaments. Ask yourself. But indifference. At no point in history there have been a world that has been more entertained. Videos, televisions, personal mobiles, destination tourist places, resorts, hotels, fun parks, amusement parks. Never before in the history of humanity, amusement and entertainment for happiness has been so customized for people. And why? I think all the pharmacists are here. The surest selling drugs in this world are antidepressants. Some pharmacists told me, Swamiji, we don't need to even market antidepressants. Why? We must ask the basic questions. Don't have apathy. Don't have indifference. At no point in history or time have we been more connected. It's not just by mail or email, but Facebook, Instagrams, WhatsApps, Instachats, Snapchats. New and new things will be coming along. We are so connected, on the go, live. At no point in human history have we been so connected, but why do we feel so lonely? Don't be indifferent to the problems of this world. And don't feel pity that fire and safety are the only issues that are being neglected. When you start becoming an aware human being, then you will become a person who cares. You know the problem with this world, they say, while we are on this issue of safety and security, there was a research that was conducted, and the title of that research was Our World at Risk. And the title of research asked, what is the biggest threat to our world? Everybody would say different things, and all these great thinkers and scientists got together and they were trying to work out the biggest threat to the world. Now be ready, I'm ticking off the ideas that were discussed. The first thing they said, climate change, maybe. Nuclear war, it can wipe out humanity. If man creates a superbug that we cannot even have a cure for, yes. They said a super volcano, if there's an eruption, then the sun would be blocked, humanity or life as we know would be wiped out. Then they said intergalactic clouds, if they block out the sun, you're out. Then they also said that perhaps the earth can quickly shift its equator, so what is North Pole becomes the equator, and what is equator becomes the North and the South Pole. Axis change would destroy us. They said it could be a meteorite strike, it could be an alien attack. But they also are worrying about creating artificial intelligence where machines are smarter than man and machines feel that human beings are a scourge. You're wiped out. After considering so many different things that can wipe out humanity, they said, but long before any of these kick in, human negativity is enough to destroy mankind. Our own negativity, our own aggression. The latest statistics say that more people commit suicide and take their own lives than all the homicides, terrorism, wars combined together. Can we afford to be negative to even our own security and safety? Can we afford to mock and belittle all the regulations that we think that we need for our buildings, our people, and safety of humanity? But unfortunately we do. And the reason is why we do this is because of our simple negligence. I feel perhaps the early caveman, he was more hopeful and positive without resources, without knowledge, without systems, without connectivity, that even from the dumps of the caves, he went up and brought us where we are. And after we are in this space age, we are so negative and paint so many doomsday scenarios that perhaps we are the only human race that can contemplate its end and still choose to do nothing about it. What a sorry state. I am asking each one of us that takes security and safety seriously. Not just fire, but of your own family, your own self, your brothers and sisters, of women, of children. All these issues and ideas are important so long as we are fired up in our own hearts. To explain very subtly and quickly, because this is a conference, I'm leaving you 3 ideas. Perhaps our negativity emerges from our self-deception. You know what do I mean by self-deception? Because it's never happened, we think it will never happen. It's the biggest illusion. There's a saying, everything is impossible until one day it happens. In 1912, when Titanic set for sailing, it was tipped to be the unsinkable ship. I will not take you into the details, that's not important. All the passengers who were climbing the ship, the crew greeted them with saying, even God cannot sink this ship. These were the famous sayings. But on the day, and the day was 15th April, 1912, when the vice president of White Star Line, which was actually supposed to own the Titanic, in New York, when he was asked that Titanic is in trouble, at 8 a.m. in the morning, he made a statement that we have complete faith in our boat and will believe it is unsinkable. When he made that statement, by that time, Titanic was already at the bottom of the ocean. So let's not be in an illusion that because it's not happened, it will never happen. We need to get out of this illusory self-deception. And things happen. The Wright brothers, when they invented, somebody just said, I think it was our Consul General, the perception of threat and systems keep evolving and changing, so we need to keep evolving and changing. The first Plane crash was in 1908 and it was done by nobody else but Orville Wright. And the first human death was his fellow passenger, Thomas Selfridge. He died in 1908 because of the first plane crash. It was blamed on what? Mechanical error. Fine. Then the planes and the machines became safer. Then the plane crashes were always tipped and blamed on human error. The largest human error of a plane crash was in 1977 when from Tenerife, KLM 747 was taking off and Pan Am was taxiing. More than 530 passengers died because of what? Human error. I'm bringing it in, the human side of any safety security. First it was machine error, then it was human error. Then, in 1942, the first hijack. See, don't think disasters are only machine and man-made. The first hijacking of a plane was done by two New Zealanders, one Brit and one South African soldier, when a seaplane of Italian origin was people as hostages, prisoners. They hijacked the plane and set themselves free. So the third disaster was human intention. Security depends on machine, it depends on error, it depends on intention. And we are all aware, the worst of human intention was the WTC attack. One of the American president, Abraham Lincoln, had said, America is too big a nation to fear any force from across the Atlantic. If destruction comes, it shall come from within. So what happened? Using American planes, American fuel, American passengers, the terrorists turned the planes into missiles. So can you see the evolution? What doesn't happen doesn't mean won't happen. So remove yourself from all these things of self-deception. We हमने building बनाया है. We have placed everything in safe. Please try and focus on the human response because things can happen. Be alert, be aware and start caring. The second most important thing which I believe that stops us from being alert for any security threat. First is self-deception. The second is self-exception. हम देख सकते हैं, we see, we find out that there are attacks, there are fire, but we always have this illusion of saying, but not me. Even after you see a plane crash, I've seen so many people happily climbing a plane. They said, oh, there's always a plane crash once a month. One has happened, so no more will happen. It's like the doctor. Outside there's a patient and the patient is completely scared and he goes to the doctor. Please don't mind me, Mr. Nayak. But the patient goes to the doctor and he says, doctor, what are my chances of survival in this operation? The doctor says, 100%. He said, really? I was reading that it is just 1 in 10? It's just 10%? The doctor said, yeah, but you don't need to worry because 9 before you have died, you are the 10th. How assuring is that? It isn't. I am just asking you that this idea of self-exception, the children of other people run away, mine never will. Everybody is having a divorce, I will never have. This can never happen to me. I am completely safe and guarded and completely protected. Well, let me tell you, I was under the same illusion when on 24th September at about 5 o'clock when Puja Vishwavihari Swami called me, that Brahmavihari Swami, there's a terrorist attack on Akshardham. My first words were, I said, no way. I said, we've harmed nobody. We are the most gentle, caring face of Hinduism. Why would somebody attack us? I said, there's no way we can be attacked. Even when I was hearing gunshots in the back of the entire call, I said we can't be So I want to come and stand before you and say that don't become a victim of also self-exception. Move away from self-deception. Keep away from self-exception. And the third thing which also hampers our honing of, fine-tuning the human response and making this entire security system gel as a complete, wholesome project is self-justification. You don't need to stand up and say that there's a technological fault. That's not necessary. We know everybody's intention. The human mind always thinks that once you justify something, you are exonerated. You know, they said, this guy's got cancer. Yeah, but because he used to smoke a lot, that's why he's got cancer. Finding out the reason why he's got cancer does not cure cancer. I had a kid in our mandir. You know, every time before exams, the mandir is flooded by children. Samajh gaye kyun? And the second time all the kids flood the temples is on what date? Tell me aloud. Result date. So 2 times, all the schools, the children come to the temple, whether they believe in that God or not, they flood. So once I got hold of this kid, I said, why are you here? He said, Swamiji, exams hai. I said, I know. So how are you prepared? He said, perfectly. After the result, I got that kid back. I said, hey, what happened? He said, I failed. But he was happy. I said, but why did you fail? He said, हम क्या करें? Syllabus से बाहर का पूछा तो हम क्या करें ले? Just because you have a reason to justify, you should not feel comfortable. If there's a fire and you said, oh, this system was in place, the camera failed, that does not save lives. Move away from self-justification, because our intellect, and we have created a civilization that is so advanced that we can literally justify the wrongs into rights. When I was in England, this is a true story from 1962, and I read this. If somebody has time, please read this and you'll know what I'm talking about, that simply intellectualizing it won't solve your issues. It's about a very famous criminal. His name is Robert Allerton. And the interview has been done by Tony Parker. This criminal in England, Robert Allerton, was so famous that he had to be put in Belmarsh Royal Prison. In England, even prisons are royal. They have this great craze for royalty. So, Belmarsh Royal Prison. This reporter, he goes to that criminal and he's taking his notes. He's so famous because even if he's out for 4 days, he's back in. He spent more time in the prison than outside on the streets. So while the reporter is talking to Robert Allerton, he says, excuse me, after your interview, is it okay if I introduce you as a criminal? Because he knows that every 2 months he's out, so he doesn't want to get into the wrong side. He said, no, introduce me as a professional criminal. So all of you professionals, please pay attention. He said, introduce me as a professional criminal. He said, what's the difference between a criminal and a professional criminal? He said a criminal is sometimes he commits a crime, but then he regrets it, so he wants to become better. A professional does not want to change his profession. A nurse is a nurse and he's a nurse. An engineer is an engineer all his life. A pharmacist is a pharmacist all his life. Just as professionals don't change, I don't want to change my profession, so I'm a professional criminal. This guy said, but so what do you do? He said, I steal money. He said, do you think it's right to steal money? He said, I think it's my earning and it's my right to earn. He said, but do you think that if somebody meets you on the streets and you rob them, do you think that's right? He said, what's wrong? I'm honest. I meet the guy on the street and I said, give me your money. I ask. He said, most of these businessmen and traders, they lie. They buy a product at a smaller price and they sell it at a higher price. They are the ones who are cheating. Think when you go home, you say, this service costs so much, but you are lying. So, he said, I'm an honest guy. And I tell him, give me your money. Very simply. And I am not even ruthless. I don't send him back to get more money. I just say, what you have. Business people say, take this on credit, go back and pay for 1 year and then empty your complete bank accounts. I am not like that. I am honest and I am considerate. I said, give me what you have. He said, would you beat somebody up if somebody refuses? Yes. He said, I give him a choice. That give me your money or I'll beat you up. And if he refuses to give me his money, then he has chosen to get beaten up, so I help him. I give complete freedom. These guys say that what if somebody refuses and fights? Would you kill him? He said, if he goes to that extent, if he physically abuses or attacks me, we were having a nice discussion and debate, but if he physically abuses me, attacks me, I'll kill him. They said, do you think it's morally right to kill somebody for money? He said, what are our army and soldiers doing? He said, they are fighting for our nation. He said, stop their wages and tell me how many go out on the borders to fight for the nation. They are killing people they don't know. They are fighting a country they don't hate. The people that they kill have done nothing to them. And this guy has been refusing to believe me and he has personally insulted me. I have a better right to kill him than the army people. This guy says, but what if you get caught? You will be jailed for 20 years. He said, yes, I know, job risk. Occupational hazard. He said, rather than living in a jail, working 8 to 8 at night and still being dissatisfied, I have my own life, an own way. I rather have a life of 60 happy years outside and 20 years in jail than 60 years in a so-called social jail and not be happy. Now, I don't want to go right to the end of this entire argument. Then otherwise you'll say that Brahmavihari Swami justified crime. No, but I'm trying to tell you, mere intellectualization can also justify a wrong into a right. So don't justify or self-justification. Most important is that when we rise beyond what's happening, you'll find out that when we rise beyond self-deception, self-exception, and self-justification, then you will find a way. So I know when you go from pillar to post and go and explain to the builders, they still don't place things into space. I know how many times you have knocked on government offices and doors and all the IPS officers who are supposed to be the Director General of the fire department, and they say, look, I know nothing. How disheartened you feel. I know that you're trying to save lives in a way that you really feel, but I also want to leave you with a last idea. With all these things around, if there is self-identification, if you identify and turn this thing more than a profession, a passion, then none of these factors will be able to contain your spirit and your energy. When you self-identify and you create a passion, you rise beyond the normalities of the normal issues that you face. Let me end with an idea which you should carry back home and which perhaps will keep you on duty forever and ever. And the idea is simple. Once I was listening to Sir Ken Robinson. He is one of the finest educationists of Great Britain. Ken Robinson was in San Francisco and he was autographing his latest book on education and ideas for further development. He quotes a story, which the story is very important here. He quotes a story of a child. He was a very intelligent, academically very high-ranking kid just before his O-levels and A-levels. The headmaster of the school brings that boy, and for personal career guidance, he tells that boy, you are so brilliant, a great academic. And I personally wish that I have chosen you for special scholarship and you should go and study further academics, do a PhD and guide and do research for thousands of other people. You are destined to be a great academic. And then very lovingly the headmaster tells the kid that, "Oh, so what do you want to be?" He said, "A fireman." The headmaster is shocked. He said, "A fireman? Look how your department or ideology is concerned. A fireman? Why would you want to be a fireman? You've got a whole world before you." He said, "Sir, I've always wanted to be a fireman. I can only see myself as a fireman. I have a passion to be a fireman." The headmaster says, "I'm giving you 1 week. Decide, talk to your parents, everybody come back to me." The kid still comes back to the headmaster and denies everything and defies him and says, "I want to be a fireman." Since that day, the headmaster bears a prejudice against this boy. He disregards him, uninvolves him, he just brushes him aside. He has no more time for this boy who refuses to obey or tag his line. Years go back, and years go by. The headmaster has long retired from his job. Once there is a critical and a crucial accident, and there's cars in fire. Suddenly, after 15-20 years, this headmaster and his wife are there, struggling to get out. One fireman brings them out, and once when they are brought out into clearance, he looks up and he finds out it is the same kid he had asked not to be a fireman. Ken Robinson writes and he says, "Profession can earn a life, passion can save a life." That's when the headmaster looked into the eyes of this little boy and said, "All these years I had always been wrong, and all this time you had always been right." Turn this idea of fire and safety into your passion, and nothing will be able to stop you. It will help to change the perspective of not just your life, but everybody's life. At the end of the day, God puts a tick on the how many people you have helped and how many people you have saved. If by your discussions and your knowledge and sharing and getting together and compelling institutions to put in rules and regulations, you will be able to generate a human response. And I want to tell you, the highest need for any human being is safety and security. How political parties win, look at that. Ever since you were rocking in the arms of your mother, the child went to sleep because it felt safe. Every time you held the finger of your father, you felt confident. Every time you put in a seat belt into a car, you feel you're safe. Every time it's announced in the, it's ironical, every time it's announced in the plane that in case the pressure drops and oxygen masks drop, please put them on and then breathe normally. I always think, how am I supposed to breathe normally at 30,000 feet up in the air, and suddenly you feel 20 oxygen masks dropping down and you say, you don't breathe normally, you panic. But I believe all these safety and security rules, protocols and procedures are to remind us to generate the right human response. So every time we sit before God and pray in our puja, in our mara, at the altar, whichever religion you believe in, it creates a sense of security and safety. And I also believe the beautiful Hindu temple that you saw in the beginning, the beautiful Hindu temple, 1,000 people must have told me that it is impossible in this place. But the kindness and generosity of the royal leadership of this nation in generating a sense of security and safety for millions of Indians who are staying here, in generating and creating a sense of harmony. All of you are there from different backgrounds, you believe in different religions, different castes, different communities. But you know what that temple has been able to do? Imagine a Muslim king donating land for a Hindu temple, first in the human civilization, where our lead architect of the temple complex is a Catholic Christian, Michael, and the chief consultant is a communist Chinese, and our project head, who is working in complete charity as the project head, is an IIT engineer, Jasbir Singh. He's a Sikh. Stand up, Jasbir Singh. What more do you want for harmony, safety, and security? Once again, I feel honored that I am here. And once again, I thank my deepest friend. Please honor him. I would ask the Consul General to stand up and take all the applaud that we can give for his presence. And everybody present here, thank you very much. Jai Swaminarayan.